Howdy there, fellas and fellettes, and welcome to the first episode of the Hodgepodge Lodge. Now, we've coined the term, it's a DNA production, and to kind of explain what that means, my name is Dustin, but I am more than honored to introduce to the man on the left side of your screen, the storyteller of all storytellers, and the man with the magnificent beard that I am still envious of to this day, Mr. Allen Fireball himself. Please take it away.
Thank you, Dustin. Hello, my name is Alan. Happy to be a part of this fresh new enterprise. I mean, the plywood is down, the items are on display, and I'm just happy to be here.
Can we talk about that real quick, right? The plywood floors and open doors that you coined. That is incredible.
Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of reminiscent. So to kind of give some background of how Dustin and I know each other, we actually kind of go back to our roots in fourth grade. Specifically, we had a shared interest in Godzilla and kaiju-esque monster fights, and Dustin, of course, having the latest GameCube cube gaming system as things go, proceeded to invite me over one day. And in going into his house, that was, I believe it was 2 or 3 stories, right?
So it was 2 stories technically. Yeah, we
Okay.
didn't have a basement.
Gotcha. Yeah, but with this house, it was very much like a an ongoing project of just kind of being finished, and so a lot of the spots had like plywood flooring. Additionally, there would just be open doorways everywhere, and also a fun fact about Dustin is he makes really incredible Spotify playlists. And so with a
Okay.
playlist that had a lot of his oldie but goodie songs, I basically coined the term plywood floors and open doors because it just was very reminiscent of a lot of time that I spent in that home alongside him. So
Oh yeah. No, the memories back then were incredible, and it's crazy that we've even known each other that long. And your memory, of course, is a lot better than mine. I remember bits and pieces. I still remember that shirt that you took from me during that Silverwood trip. Never quite got it back. But
was it the what I am or the everyday struggle shirt?
actually, I think it was the Stewie and Brian on a canoe, and it was like a green shirt. Do you remember that? It was Family Guy
Ooh,
themed.
ooh. I don't, admittedly, in that front of things. I because like I know those 2 shirts that I mentioned, I did purloin as a young kid, which I apologize about as a man now. But
There's two
but yeah,
more. There's two more I could think of, right? So
mhm,
there's the king cat with the crown and all the jewelry. I
mhm.
think you ended up using that one when you went to college, right?
And that one I still have. Yeah,
Oh,
it's actually in a pile of clothing off screen, that I've just freshly washed. But I
perfect.
did try to return it. I should specify that to the viewers out there. I did try to return that
Yeah,
shirt on
no,
multiple
no.
occasions.
I would give this guy the shirt off my back every time he asks, but I there's two specific, the King Cat Crown one and then the Respect My Authority, Eric Cartman. I remember you used that one a few times.
Yeah, I don't believe I took that one as things go. So
Yeah, you probably didn't. I just don't know what happened to it.
yeah, yeah.
But so to get a little bit of an idea on what this podcast is going to be, um, first and foremost, we're going to introduce ourselves throughout this. We kind of did a little sprinkle right there, but you're also going to see the icon that I designed for this podcast, and we wanted to do something a little bit different where, there's a lot of podcasts out there that are kind of copy and paste, not disrespecting anybody, formula works, but I thought it would be kind of fun if we took our similar interests, which we'll get into as well, and incorporated it into a mascot that can kind of be the voice and the face, or, the face of this podcast along with us. So the design that you saw at the beginning of the show, that is Mr. Hodge, and he will be the shining symbol of this podcast moving forward. So, Alan and I, we've been wanting to do this for what, a couple years now?
Oh yeah, I think we've definitely chatted about it on whims, and now we're fully kind of getting around to it as things go.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously, the world's been crazy for the last couple years, and personal things. You're off becoming basically a master at everything you're doing. This man is just, I'm sure we'll get into his story eventually, but it's inspiring. And then obviously I'm down still in our old small town and working away trying to get my stuff figured out. So, um, yeah, we just kind of want to give a bit a bit about ourselves as well as what the podcast is going to be. So you'll be seeing Hodge moving forward, and a little bit of what we enjoy about that is we're both retro heads, right? I think that's safe to say. And we kind of like the older aesthetic, so that's what we went with. But we like to try to keep that gentleman code alive. And so we try to incorporate a little bit of that, but also just I'll have you take it away because you explained it a little bit better than me. But
Mm,
kind of just like that retro voice that you'll hear on the radio kind of idea.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think definitely it's kind of along the lines of like with a lot of our interests, there is like that idea of like the kind of like older aesthetic as things go. And I think like for instance, for like a couple of games where that was really prevalent for me is the Fallout setting, the Bioshock setting, additionally, in that regard. Like I think that it's like it's an aesthetic and like a genre that I really appreciate. In the RPG realm, I really enjoy Call of Cthulhu 1920s esque, where you've got like those golden voice radio operators and radio men as things go. And so I think very much like in that sense of things, like it's the idea that basically it's somebody who you would kind of tune into, and it's like for tonight's next story,
Yeah.
and in that angle of things, just kind of like offering that variety. I think Hodge will go on to symbolize very much like a collector of sorts, or a kind of, I guess, along the lines of specifically just kind of somebody who has a wealth of knowledge, but not necessarily an expert in one thing as things go. And so I think rather than being like really a specialized podcast where we're talking about underwater basket weaving or potentially scuba diving in that regard, no fault to them. Who knows? We might actually talk about the myths and legends of both at some point.
Yeah.
But specifically, just kind of offering like that kind of personality and that aesthetic to kind of like cultivate like what is the Hodgepodge Lodge and how does the Hodgepodge Lodge kind of get held together under this idea.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what it's going to be. I mean, the definition of hodgepodge is basically a random assortment of items or things. So this podcast is going to be a random assortment of topics that we want to talk about, and this is going to be the pilot episode. So we're going to be figuring things out. As you can see, we're going to be figuring out our technology aspect side of things. We're going to, over time, we'll just get better with it, but we also want this to just be raw and authentic. We want it to feel like two gentlemen sitting in front of a fireplace, having a nice cold drink, just kind of shooting the shit. And obviously, because of what I just said, you know, there might be a couple explicitives, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not. I'm not too huge on having to like hide things or anything like that. So um, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think another aspect too. So any music heads out there, if you know the Gorillas, I think everybody knows the Gorillas. The way that Hodge is going to be presented over time is kind of like how the Gorillas characters are presented. You've watched them grow, you've watched them age, you've watched them become their own people. And so that's just a little tidbit of information on what to expect from Hodge moving forward. So, Alan, speaking of what kind of influenced the design aspect behind the podcast, and then obviously the idea behind it, I think a fun little story to ask would be what got you into Fallout in the very beginning? Like, how did you discover that world?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. So specifically for me, it was through interacting with some of my more affluent friends at the time. I was probably on a GameCube by the point that like Xboxes and PlayStations were kind of really taking off as things go. And so I discovered the Fallout world through mainly just being a passenger. I very much was somebody who who enjoyed the aesthetic, but I was like, I don't know if I'm really into an RPG sort of setting. Like, I've played first person shooters and all that jazz, but like just the way that the game was framed, I'm like, I'm just not sure if it's for me. But I like the storytelling that's kind of there.
Hmm.
And eventually, over time, playing through the various titles that came out of recent, like, well, a couple decades for a couple as things go, or no, mainly a decade, my bad. But specifically Fallout 3,
Hmm.
Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas, like each one of them has like an aesthetic or a charm that very much kind of like drew me in deeper. And I think that with a number of people who kind of like speak to like, oh, what is the lore of this game, like what are like the secret locations and what are like the aspects of this game that are like truly interesting that game developers were going, and I think that's where I really hit my stride with it. um, Eventually I came to a place where I specifically enjoyed playing as a Fallout character as things go, and in that was able to kind of develop like this really kindred love of like, yeah, these games are pretty cool, and I mean, I think that it's a really interesting take to take like a dystopian 1930s or 40s like future, and then just kind of see what happens when you go into the future after those culminating events that take place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree right there. And um, I remember the way that I got into it was pretty funny because I remember this trip vividly that we used to go on a trip to somewhere that we live in such a small town, we have to drive an hour to get to the nearest anything relevant, right? Like Walmart, McDonald's, fast food stores, whatever. You have to drive an hour to get there. And my mom and I used to go on those trips all the time as a kid. We would, go probably 2, 3 times a week. So one of these trips, um, I had somehow convinced her, and I don't remember how old I was, but I had convinced her to let me get a game, and it was for the Xbox 360 at the time. So that probably gives you a timeline on when it was. But I remember specifically we were at Target, and she was like, "Okay, you can get one, but you're not getting a new one. You only got 30 bucks." And most games when they come out new are like 50, $60. Anymore it's more, but um I remember specifically I walked around and I picked up a copy of Need for Speed Carbon and I was looking at that and I look over and I see this just like, really dark light green cover with this cool looking, I thought it was a robot at first, but this cool looking dark, almost Star Wars like character on it. I picked it up and the title read Fallout 3. And of course, the cover was actually the Brotherhood of Steel, but I sat there and looked at both of them, young Dustin trying to make a decision like it was the most important thing on the planet and finally I decided, she came up, she was like, "I'm leaving in a few minutes or in a few seconds, so you need to get going." So I finally picked up Fallout 3. And from that day, I would say that that franchise has influenced a lot of my personal, you know, interests and likes when it comes to aesthetics or sounds, like the old school radio sounds and the retro designs, like those billboards and the advertisements, the old school pinup style, just everything like that. And of course, like you said, just the world of Fallout for me is something that I was able to get immersed in completely, and it became one of my favorite franchises to this day. I even enjoyed 76, which is kind of debatable for some people. Um,
That might
I
be a lively debate down the line
Yeah,
for
down
sure,
the line
since
we
I
could.
did not enjoy 76, but it's
I
coming around, I think.
Oh yeah, no, they've been doing great.
Hmm.
I will say that when I'm around Alan, anytime I mention the name Mork, it brings up some controversial emotions. Um, that's a character that he may or may not like very much, but we'll
Yeah,
we'll we'll save that for the debate. Um, so let's kind of get back on track with let's talk about how we met and growing up and basically how our friendship formed over the years. And to me, he's a brother to me at this point. I mean, one of my favorite things he said is that we had this old leather couch that was in our family for years, and not too long ago we actually finally had to get rid of it. But he was like, my ass is probably imprinted in that thing from the amount of times that I've slept over, and just So many memories, but I want to hear it from your side. Tell me about, after we started hanging out, and tell me a little bit about the archives of our relationship over the years.
Yeah, you're wanting me to give the deep dish dive
Yeah.
today as things go.
You've got
Yeah,
that
all
memory catalog, my guy.
so yeah, so very much like after that first meeting in fourth grade, when I went out into the country, rode the bus for like one of the first times of my life as things go. I very much lived within biking distance of the school, so I would mainly just walk or I'd bike home. But after Dustin and I specifically began to kind of hang out more, like I think it was very much like I ended up spending a lot of time during the weekends over at his family's place, and I think like I remember a great deal of really good dinners that were had there, a great deal of times where we just kind of spent just kind of doing whatever. um, I think another affinity we had was we had an immense love of Legos. We
Oh yeah.
actually did a collaboration project of an entire Clone Wars jungle battle that we might get into more depth as time goes on. But it was
Oh,
definitely one of those
we
really cool.
gotta we gotta brag about that, man. We have a county fairgrounds that shows up once a year where we lived, right? And they had a competition where you did Lego. Like people would submit their custom built Legos. Sometimes you would see some that literally just came out of the package with instructions, and that's fine and dandy. But Alan and I, we grew up on Legos. That was another huge thing for us when we were younger. And so, like he said, we just constructed this huge. To us, it was huge at the time, but I think we went through and we like found ways to mount characters flying through the sky and
Hmm.
all these other things, and it looked cool. And I remember when we were taking it over there to put it in the presentation spot that I was terrified that it was gonna, get jumbled or broke. But um, yeah, no, that those were some great times. And sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but I did want to say, what place did we get?
Well, we did end up getting first place in that front. I wonder if we might have set a PR for like the largest like entry submitted in that
Oh
category of
yeah.
things, but I never heard as things go. But yeah, so that was definitely one of the crowning moments. I think on a couple of other occasions, we actually went, for those of you that are familiar with Coeur d'Alene, specifically, we went to Silverwood on several occasions
Mhm.
together. Usually I'd be going with Dustin's family, and I'd get to kind of experience sites that normally wouldn't really have much of a chance to do on my own as things go. Um, and then we just kind of, between ourselves and one of our mutual friends Dakota, like we just kind of formed like this really strong bond
Shout out
of
Dackledore.
yeah, who might make a appearance on this podcast. We'll see what happens.
Maybe.
But specifically, yeah, we just kind of kept in touch over the years. We kept hanging out all through high school. Um, Ended up having a lot of like really really cool and awesome memories our senior year as things go. And then very much we've been friends ever since. I believe if I'm running the clock back, I think it's been probably about 15 years that we've known each other. Like we've been friends
Wow.
for, because yeah, I think if I'm doing the metric right, you would have come into the full, well, we would have become friends probably about, oh, sorry, I don't mean to blunder arithmetic in front of the viewers as
No,
things
no.
go.
We're just
But
shooting the shit, man. It's all good.
but but yeah, I think with the start of this year, it's been 15 years since we first started hanging out. So
That kind of blows my mind to think about because we've been friends for more than half of my lifetime.
mhm.
Isn't that crazy? Both of our lifetimes, technically.
Yeah.
Wow. I actually didn't realize it's been that long. I thought it was like around 10 years. That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, Dakota, since I knew Dakota first, admittedly, I think he's at around 17 years at this point. So that's what kind of made the arithmetic there. But yeah, no, it's definitely been a friendship that I think has been one of the most like evolutionary and like ongoingly improving moments where, we can talk about anything and everything in this point.
Hmm.
Like I think that it's very much in that space of things. Like rather than us being like, okay, I'm going to go off and I'm going to go do the next part of my life. have a nice life and I'll see you when I see you.
Right.
Instead, it's very much kind of become this space of like, well, I call Dustin to let him know what I'm up to, and there's like a dull moment where I'm like, oh, I want to talk to somebody from back home. And so I'll probably usually call up Dustin or someone else close in that angle of things. Currently, as Dustin had referenced in his intro as things go, I'm currently residing in Indiana pursuing a master's degree. So I am quite far from home after a 30-hour car drive.
Yeah. No, he's been what is it? Yeah, 30 hours, you said?
Roughly, I would say.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm one of the very few that never left where we live, right? And we're in a small town in Montana, so and by small I mean I think the population was up until the last couple of years with the pandemic and everything, but it was like what, 1200 maybe? Like
That's what I would quick math to. Yeah, about
yeah,
1,200 people.
it was tiny. I mean, you could drive through the town in a minute. It's like, "Hey, here's the town and there it goes," right? So, it's but a lot of memories made in that town and but I'm proud of my boy here for pursuing his dreams and doing things that, you know, quite frankly should be unfathomable, but he put his feet in the mud and trudged on through. And so, do you want to tell us what you're pursuing a master's degree in?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'm currently pursuing a master's in student affairs administration in higher education. Currently, it's a degree that will allow me to work within one of the many arms of a university system. So it could see me working for housing, it could see me working for admissions, or it could potentially pertain to another role within that. I am kind of thinking about what that might look like as things go. So I'm still kind of soul searching of where I'd ultimately want to be in higher ed. But specifically, it has been such a divergent direction in comparison to what my undergraduate degree was in. But all the while, I've been really, really found that I really enjoy the choice that I've made,
Hmm.
and it's been a very fulfilling path in obtaining my master's as things go.
Oh yeah. No, you've been killing it and you've been rocking this whole thing. I mean, like I said, I always tell you anyway, but and I'm going to give you your flowers. I do behind the scenes, I'm going to do it now, but you're an inspiration and anybody who knows you and knows what you've overcome from the time you were a kid to now should tell you that, you know. And one of the things that should tell you that, and this is a fun story that I really want to talk about, senior prom. I think that is a wonderful story to tell because I never attended a prom before this, and I never wanted to attend a prom before this.
Are you wanting me to speak on that story, or do you want
Yes.
to share it yourself?
No.
I don't want to steal too much of the space as
I
things go.
I would like you to tell the story on how you guys even managed to get me to go, and then from there, I'll tell my side.
Yeah. So yeah, I think very much it was one of those points where, with it being senior prom, it was the prom. Our school had the ability to basically, if you were an underclassman, you could go to prom if you wanted to. I ended up going all 4 years as things go, and I had a good time of it. And I think like I was a very socially awkward and possibly withdrawn at points kid by that point as things go. But my senior year, specifically, I was very much kind of coming out of my shell, coming into my own, and really kind of getting ready for the next step of things as undergrad. With it being like the last point that potentially to go, an angle that I ended up having to go as things go was I had actually been a nominee for the prom king nomination as things go,
Yes, sir.
and I was uh, I was like, well, I'd really like to go with my friends as things go, and so Dakota was all for it, and we turned and we were like, Dustin, do you want to come with us to prom? And Dustin initially was like, no, I really wouldn't want to do that
Nah,
as things go.
nah.
I've said as things go 5 times. My public speaker in me has been has been
It's like when
thrashed.
it's like when people say the word like or
Hmm.
Yeah, I get that.
Hmm. Yeah. And so we just kind of went and just started convincing him. It's like, well, there might be somebody that you might want to go with. And I don't know specifically if the person who you ended up with asked you or not as things go. Uh,
So the story that I or the what I remember, right? So I
mhm.
think it was the end of a school day, and this person that I went with, she was a friend of ours growing up. She was one of the ones that's been in that town the entire time, and still is a friend of ours, right? And her sister was going, and her sister was trying to get her to go, but she was kind of along the same way of how I felt. I was like, no, I'm going through school. I was kind of this, not, I wouldn't say outcast in a way, but like I was socially anxious and nervous. I wasn't good at, making my presence known and making friends, everything like that. And to piggyback what you said, um, I didn't come out of my shell until senior year either. And that's huge part, thanks to Alan, because he managed to build this reputation of respect by everybody. Like basically everybody liked him. And so he was always involved in every aspect. And the thing that I've always loved about this guy is he's never changed who he is for anybody. He could hang out with the jocks, he could hang out with the nerds, he could hang out with the quiet ones, he could hang out with anybody and make them feel warm and welcome, right? So that's why he's always been my number one when it comes to friendship and brotherhood, because he's never once changed who he is. Even to this day, he's still the same kid that I know from Godzilla back in fourth grade. So, uh, anyway, I didn't come out of my shell till senior year. So this person was walking down the hall. I was walking down the hall, and from my memory, if it serves me correct, you and Dakota, I was trying to go around the office, where on a first name basis, Sally, obviously, we love Sally in this
Mm-hmm.
household, right? Sally's
Mm-hmm.
the best. If somehow anybody who knows Sally sees this and can, send this message, I hope she's doing well. But I was trying to make that corner to go out the doors to, leave. And I think you and Dakota came up like, no, 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 come here. And then, the person I ended up going with, her sister was doing the same thing for her. And so it felt like a movie to me because you guys were like, no, 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 no. And you kept pushing and pushing. We both have red blush faces, her and I. And you're like, you two asked to go to prom. And we're like, you want to go to prom? Sure. Yeah. And then that's how it literally happened. That's how we finally, it's like, I'm not going to say no at that point. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, but I didn't. And, I was about as red as your shirt probably. And for in my mind, I'm like, but
Might have been the most ruthless moment of senior year, truthfully, but I mean, it was for a good cause, so
no,
hopefully that makes up for
I
it.
want to say this ended up being one of my favorite memories from school ever. Really, it worked out great, but in that moment, I'm just like, oh, I'm just like, I'm gonna. Ugh. So, um, anyway, that's how it ended up getting put together, where we finally went, right? And
Mhm.
Dakota, he was the one that was like, dude, I will rent your suit. I will do everything in that way. So thank you, Dakota. I've said it before, but thank you again. And um, so you and Dakota were, we were the Three Musketeers for a while. We used to do game nights every weekend and everything like that. And we can get into that too at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you two were the MVPs. And so that's how it came together. You two already had your dates. You had everything figured out. You were obviously nominated for Prom King, which 10 out of 10 there. But this is when the story gets really fun. So I'll kind of set it up here. What we were going to do to reference back to the city that we drive through that's an hour away. So I think it was the day of prom. We woke up early, and as a group with everybody that was going and, their dates and everything, the majority of us went to that city to go to what's called the hub, and we were going to play, I think, laser tag and, the
Mhm.
arcade games. It was fun. Um, but
I accidentally knocked over a small kid during laser tag, and I felt horrible about it.
trucked him like a football player.
I just rounded a corner, and then just whop.
Yeah. Do
Like,
we
sorry.
correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Austin who won that?
Oh, I think Austin very realistically won it. I remember Austin just diving behind cover, ambushing people. Like it was
Oh,
very
he
much like
was
I was moving at a slow pace as things go, and Austin was just booking it around the entire spot. Like just no mercy
dude,
from
Austin's incredible. He's created so many memories. But anyway, this trip was a lot of fun. But this is where I'm going to have you continue the story because I believe this is where things started to get a little stressful, you
Yeah.
know, I would say.
Yeah, I think that it was very much one of those moments where we kind of got back into town, and we ended up going to the person who had asked me to prom's house for a steak dinner, as things go. So very much we didn't have to go to.
We did get to town very quickly,
Mhm.
I will say, just to add to the suspense here.
It was a bit expedited. We had very much people needed to get ready and get all done up. We had to get into our suits as things go. So we weren't like going to Missoula or oh shoot, we weren't going to specifically this town to basically in our full regalia for prom.
Right.
And so we
Yeah.
got back to town, and specifically, we get there, and while this is all happening, the clock is just ticking down. And I'm aware that the grand march, where everybody goes through and gives their like basically gets to show themselves off to the public and populace that were there. And I think it was very much one of those points where I was very much like, well, I really don't want to miss this moment because, just being nominated alone was just such an amazing and just honor and great honor as things go. And I really wanted to be there, but by the point we were like coming up to the edge of the wire, we were basically driving there. I and it was not probably characteristically one of my most stressful moments of my life. Like, it took me a second to really calm down and just be like, "It's okay." But
Hmm.
I think it was just that fear of, like, leave it or, like, getting there and we're too late, and then suddenly whatever might would have happened could have potentially changed by my absence of not, being there. And and so it was definitely one of those points where a older version of myself probably would have told the younger version of me, "Is like, you need to calm down." Like, it hopefully they would understand. It's like maybe they try to get in contact with you or yada yada yada. Um, but yeah, so we ended up getting there right at the nick of time. I think we had maybe about 20 people to go before we had to get into the lineup as things go.
Hmm.
And and sure enough, I got to walk with my date that I had for the evening. Got to do the I guess the photogenic shoot as things go.
Hmm.
And as we were standing there, I was beside two of my really good friends, as well as well, I guess I should say free of my really good friends in that angle of things.
Yeah.
But eventually, the nominations were drawn, and I was selected to be prom king. And
Yeah.
it was definitely this like moment of knowing that all this work that I had done to kind of come back around the bend of things that had kind of happened in my past was very worthwhile. But I definitely do apologize for anybody that had to basically come under the crossfire of a very stressed out person just trying to get to that moment of time in prom.
Yeah, yeah, and that to emphasize just how much it meant to Alan was like it wasn't just winning prom king because not only did he win prom king, but he was in the ballots against like the most popular kids in school. And anybody, everybody has those kids in school that will get 90% of the votes or just the ones who are the social butterflies and the ones that everybody likes, right? And so this whole time, he was just he was like going back and forth, like, well, I gotta win, but then it's like I'm probably not going to. And then us being almost late and having to drive back as quick as we can, right? And having to wait on people finishing getting ready, and it's like the dinner, everything like that. Everything was just like stockpiling, and so to see that moment happen as a bystander to watch him and watch his face when he got picked and everybody cheering, I thought that was just the most wholesome thing in the world. And I'm like, you did that, bro. You did that and you deserve it. And I'm glad that you guys pushed me to be there because I got lucky enough to witness that moment, and it's going to be ingrained in my mind forever. And another thing that's ingrained in my mind, I think I've talked to you about this a couple times, but I want to reiterate that I have not ever been near the presence of a woman or like danced with anybody in my life to this point. So not only did I not want to be there, but I also had to dance and with a lady, right? So my internal anxiety at that point, I was like, how can I dolphin dive out of a window and get out of here? Like, you know, right? So I was just nervous as all hell. I was sweating buckets, and I was overweight. At that point, I had lost a decent amount, but I was still overweight and everything. And so wearing like 3 layers of shirts, the shirt, the coat, the vest, whatever, I'm dying, right? So then the slow dance songs start playing. And this is what I was dreading the whole time because most of the time we were kind of just chilling at the table, talking, having a good time. And of course, Alan was out doing prom king things, but he would come join us and make sure everybody was okay and chat with us. And so we were enjoying just hanging out because none of us were super, we weren't out there breakdancing on the floor, wanted all the attention or anything like that. And so the slow dance came up, and you and your date or prom queen, one of the two, because you had to like split your time. It got really interesting there.
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of like being like basically seeing everybody and chatting with them, but then also making sure that my date was, doing fine. And like we would dance and everything. But definitely it was one of those moments where since we kind of arrived on like the later angle of it, I'm like, well, I want to go say hello to people, and so I was just kind of meandering along as things go. But yeah, there was a slow dance with the queen as a part of it. And usually I'm pretty flary when it comes to my dancing. Like at that time, like, I knew how to waltz, I knew how to swing. I knew some moves. But I think I was so terrified of being an embarrassment in that moment. Like if I accidentally did something that dropped the queen, or if like I fell on the ground like that, I just thought that that would have been like that was just a nightmare for me. So I kept it very, very tame in the dance moves with the occasional twirl and whatnot. But it was not my flashiest dance, I will say that. And that was very intentional because I'm like, if I drop this person, I will never hear the end of it and my night will be ruined.
Yeah, and also shout out to the queen, by the way. You know who you are and everything that's been going on in your life. So just know that we're thinking of you and we're proud of you and the way you're handling everything. So keep being strong. You're great. Um, but I was curious how you felt about that because this is where it really felt like a movie for me. So, Dakota, your guys' dates kept coming up to me and my date, and you're like, you guys need to come up. It's the slow dance. If you're not going to dance to anything else, you need to slow dance. And we're sitting there like, and then eventually, like getting talked into actually going in the first place, they managed to silver tongue their way to getting us out there. This memory will be ingrained until I'm on my deathbed. So we get out there. She has to tell me where to put my hands because I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, right? So it's one of those where her hands were up around my neck, and you're just spinning in a circle slowly, right? To paint the picture, you're slowly spinning in a circle. So I'm looking this way, and you guys are like back here and back there, right, across the
Mhm.
dance floor. So as I'm slowly turning, we're dancing. I see Dakota and his date, right? And I just see him going over the shoulder of his date. And it's like everything's in slow motion because I'm spinning. Everything's in slow motion. Everything else is blurred except for my date, you guys, and your dates, right? So I'm spinning in a slow circle. I see Dakota over there just cheesing it up, like, yeah, you do, you go, bro. And then I turn around and I just see Alan with the biggest, goofiest fucking smile on his face, just like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, this was worth it. I love this. It's great. But just, it was like a movie. There's no other way to explain it. It was just slow motion. The background was blurred. And all I saw was my buds in the limelight, just the low lit light, just putting the thumbs up like you're doing this, man. Good job. And that's forever going to be one of my favorite memories. Plus the whole day and just that was an incredible time.
Mhm. Yep, that was definitely a moment where, it was Yeah, I think Dakota and I had both been like, it's like we're gonna get this guy out of his shell, whether he quote unquote likes it or not, and
I was
and
stubborn. There's no doubt about it. I was stubborn.
so it was a very giddy moment for us as things go, and I definitely like admire that POV view because I think there were definitely instances of that night where I can kind of also echo and be like, yeah, it felt like a movie. Like
hmm
it was something that I did not even expect at all, and so yeah.
Yeah. No, you could write a movie script about that whole day. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of your other favorite high school memories throughout your time here?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think that one that I really enjoyed was specifically as I kind of played more and more basketball over the years. Like there were
Oh
several
yeah.
moments that I really, really
Yeah.
enjoyed playing. I was not a good player. I should preface that. Like I was not somebody who carried the team or anything in that front, but I enjoyed the
No,
camaraderie of
you
it. I think
you were
there was
the
much to. Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say, no, you had the biggest heart out of anybody, and that's what made you great. Because you constantly, I remember the battle cries. You would like scream running down the court. That became like your moniker, right? In track, basketball. I don't know about golf. I don't think you should be screaming at golf, but
No, that would have been frowned upon,
yeah,
and I.
probably. Just like every time you take a swing, just ah, it's just, um, but yeah, no. So go ahead and continue. I just wanted to make sure you know that you had the greatest heart of everybody there.
Oh, you're too kind, Dustin.
Just honest.
Yeah, in several of my sporting instances, with the exception of golf, there were commonly moments where I would roar at people or at the sky itself. Like it would just be my way to amp myself up and keep me going. And I think that kind of came from reading a bunch of sci-fi and fantasy novels where like the main characters are like they unearth this battle cry that rings across the and I think that like in those moments like there were definitely times where when I roared it was definitely meaningful and like a really cool backdrop to things. um
One of the best roars, and I want your perspective on this because I want to know how you felt. It was a home game. You had finally gotten in to play, right? Because I think you were sitting out for a while, and you were fine. The coach finally said, "Okay, Alan, get in there." I was sitting on the bench because we were playing basketball on the same team at this point, and I don't remember if this was middle school or early high school, one of the two.
it would have been either middle school or early high school, I think,
Yeah, so
because
like,
I think I started playing at seventh grade.
okay, and I think I did I join in a year later or the same year you started?
I thought you were there the same year I started,
Okay,
because yeah.
so this would have been middle school.
Mm.
Um, this is another one, and anybody who was there will tell you, but I was sitting on, the bench and watching these guys play, and I'll have you talk through it. But I remember you had gotten the ball right by the hoop, and what happened next made just everybody lose their minds.
Yeah, yeah. I think if I'm remembering this correctly as things go, I think what it was we were basically battling for possession. Like I think a shot had been thrown up, and I had somehow been in the right place at the right time because I think I would get so agitated when I would, and not like in like a bad way, but it's just like I'd get so jittery when I would throw a ball that I wouldn't be really throwing with precision because I'd be under pressure and I'd be like, oh gosh, and then I'd throw it. And so I ended up getting it, and I was playing a post at this point, and I was able to throw it back in. The ball goes, and then I think I just kind of, if I'm not mistaken, I sprinted away, and as I went back down the court, I roared, heading back into a defensive position as things go. And it was definitely one of those points where I think what happened was when I saw that the crowd was feeding into me, I would just take that energy and I would run with
Oh
it.
man, I mean, everybody on the bench stood up screaming. The coach was screaming. Everybody in the crowd lost their mind. I honestly think that might have been the loudest that crowd ever was. Now, this is a high school gym, right? So it's not like thousands of people, but it was a packed crowd, right?
Mhm.
And that was the loudest I've heard that building out of any game that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah. I think specifically there was one other instance where it either rivaled that moment or it was potentially more in that regard of just basically just the sheer volume of people cheering and just hearing it just deafen the entire
Yeah.
moment of things for me was just like this really interesting moment where um I guess to kind of go into it as things go, we were playing a nearby team. We had shifted into Class C ball at this point, so we were playing schools that had littler populations of students.
Hmm.
And this team in particular had been talking some trash, admittedly, and I was very much the character of being like, I'm somebody who believes in very good sportsmanship. I very much am like a rule follower as things go, and so. But when I was hearing it's like, oh, we're gonna come and we're gonna thrash your team and we're gonna beat you, it's like when I heard that, I'm like, absolutely not. And um, but
Not
then
on my
fast forward,
watch.
not on my watch, exactly. But fast forward to that game in question, and we are up probably about 30 points going into the second half on this team. And we basically get this point where during the third quarter we just kind of get this lead that could come back upon, but it would take a lot. And I was brought in, and I had a sophomore vanguard. I'm a senior by this point, just as reference,
Mm.
playing on varsity ball as things go. And what ends up happening is I kind of go out to the wing, and I'm at the farthest extent of the 3 point line when basically they get me the ball, and I just hear a whole bunch of people across the crowd saying, "Shoot it." And I
Mm.
remember distinctly there was just this one masculine voice that I could hear, like just like the faintest whisper at my ear, being like, "Shoot it." And so I, being a post and not really a 3 point shooter, I just kind of assemble my arms in the form of a trebuchet, and I hurl the ball into the air right as a defender is coming to like get on me. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, there's no way that's going in. I'm a trash 3 point shooter. When all of a sudden the ball just splashes into the net. And as I started running back, I just started to see people rise, and like just the intensity of like this moment just building as everybody just roared. And right as I got onto my defensive, I basically folded in my arms and extended them, and I bellowed back because at this point I'm like, I will be seeing the retreat of this team and you will know my wrath.
Yeah.
um, I, I then promptly proceeded to get one of their starters to foul out. I was given 2 free points or free throws. I missed both of them promptly, and then I just played out the game, just being the barbaric version of myself, and
Yeah.
just having a time of it.
We'll just remember the 3 point, The
Yeah,
other ones
yeah,
were just extra on the top, but
yeah.
yeah, that's something I do miss, like, because I actually phased out of sports for the last few years of high school. I played a mixture of football and basketball. Those were the two that I played. You were like all around. You played a bunch of different ones,
Mhm,
but man, I just traveling with you guys on the buses, and I will say that there's nothing that hits more than a gas station snack after a football game on the way back,
mhm.
or a basketball game. I don't know why, but just like those moments in time are stuck in my head. And I don't necessarily remember the specific time frame. Again, my memory is bad when it comes to time and back then. But I think you were still playing. We were still playing because you played all the way through, I believe, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it was when you and I were playing, and it was a home team or a home game. And to give some insight, like we definitely had the star players on the team, right? You had two people that we were kind of told, like, get them the ball because we know they can score consistently, right? And they were good at what they did, right?
Mhm,
Um, but it did kind of take away from other people getting a chance to play. Not
mhm,
not saying anything disrespectful to the people who were the main players because we get it. If you're the stars, then we understand. But like for me, for instance, I didn't get barely any time to actually like touch the ball unless it was to pass it, right? So
mhm,
I remember this home game, and the ball got passed to me, and I was outside the 3-point line. And I remember I had a wide open shot, and in my mind, I'm just like, the coach told me to just pass the ball, and everybody's over there like, pass it, pass it. But I'm like, this is the one time I'm gonna get a chance. So I may have stepped on toes and broke the rules, but I shot that ball and it swished for 3 points. And I just remember, similar to what you said, it was nowhere near as loud as yours, and rightfully so. But I remember swishing that ball for a 3 point, running back, and I specifically remember some of our classmates sitting at the end of the benches, right? The fold out big blue benches in the gym. We all remember
Mhm.
those things. And they were sitting there and they were just cheering and they were like, yeah, way to go, Dustin. And that's the first time I've ever heard that in my life when it comes to like that, sports or anything.
Mhm.
And I believe I ended up doing 2 3 points that game. And
Mm.
that was like the highlight of my basketball career, right? It was
Mhm.
that was like it for me.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll never forget those moments. It's just ingrained, just running by and seeing, some of our favorite groups of people there cheering us on, and it's like it makes me wish I stuck with it, because those kind of memories you just can't get back, and you can't replace them. So those are a couple of the things that I remember the most, and of course, playing football in the little leagues. I was a quarterback, and then obviously when we were starting to kind of transition into the more, what do you call it, the higher ups, like the early high school, everything like that, that's when it started to change for me because someone else came in and I didn't get a chance to be the quarterback anymore. And so, um, yeah, I just fell out of it. But you, you were track, golf, basketball. Uh, I want to say there's more, right? Cross country.
I wasn't a track athlete, but I was a cross country athlete. Yeah. So it was,
Okay.
I ran cross country in the fall, played basketball in the winter, and I golfed in the spring.
Okay.
I did serve as a manager my freshman year for the football team, but I kind of fell out of that as things go. And so then I just kind of was like, I'm going to get good at running because I've never been good at running. So that was kind of what drove me there. Um, I had a couple of moonlight performances as a theater student.
Mhm.
And then additionally, yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it in that regard.
Yeah. No, I mean, you excelled in everything you did. You just have the discipline as of a goddamn fucking bull. It's like you get your mind set to it and you're going through no matter what happens. But yeah, no, that's just a little history, and we'll go into more of it, obviously, throughout the episodes and everything. But I think we're just about close on time here for this first one. So um, to kind of wrap things up a little bit, uh, that's kind of how we met and a little bit of our backstory. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys tune in for the next one. So we are going to obviously have some podcasts that are themed around specific topics, but we're going to talk about anything and everything on this podcast, right? So it's like we're going to talk about games because that's one of our biggest common passions. We'll probably talk about movies at some point. We might talk about music. I know that I want to talk about our history with 3 Days Grace and how much, influence there. I want to get into talking about our old school Halo Legendary Campaign one nighters, um, game nights with the boys, and just kind of like getting a deep dive into who we are and our interests. And then, we also plan on doing a few fun things. We do want, for anybody that made it this far, comment down something either that you want to see or also ask us some questions that you would like to know, because I do want to do every so often, I want to involve anybody who's listening into this as much as possible. And so I would love to do, ask me anything, questions and answers so that Alan and we can, answer some things. And maybe people who grew up around us and know us, maybe you guys have some stories that you want to tell, So if you let us know in the comments, or if you just want to message us personally, or we'll also have an email and everything set up. You can email us and I'll have that in the description. But we want to hear everything. questions, comments, feedback on how we could do this better. Um, and then we also want to hear your stories, or if we talk about our stories, you know, and I'm sure that you feel this way, Alan, you can chime in anytime. But
Hmm.
I also would love to talk about some of our stories because I think, things that you've gone through, things that I've gone through, I think there's some people out there that we might be able to help, bring up a little bit or like maybe help out. And that's something that we've always been big about is being gentlemen, good ethics, good morals, and just wanting to help people and be good to people. And so if there's anybody out there that, has any sincere questions or you're going through something and you want to hear us talk about it, or if we can, with your consent, obviously talk about what you're going through and what we could possibly think of doing in those instances to help, then please let us know. That's something I want this, we would want this to be is,
Hmm.
we want this to be a safe, fun place for everybody. And, and all while it's just going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, expect a bunch and expect a variety of things. We're going to be cooking up some different ideas here for the next one, but we wanted to get this episode put together and get things kind of going, get the ball rolling, and see where things take us. But um, do you have any leaving messages here, Alan? Lasting comments?
Yeah, I just want to say to those of you that have made it to this point, thank you so much for listening to our pilot episode. Definitely means a lot that you're taking time out of your day to be like, there's this new podcast. I wonder what's about as things go. I definitely would say that we are definitely very interested in covering a variety of things. I think that there isn't this podcast is not as I said going to be very much a specialist in the fact that it's like, oh yes, we're going to be covering anything and everything about one specific topic, but I think offering a variety of topics that kind of so the need, the climate, the current state of where we're at in the month as things go. So yeah, if there's any questions or comments, feel free to reach us at our socials. And in that space of things, we look forward to hearing from you soon.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in to the first ever episode of the Hodgepodge Lodge podcast with Alan and I. And we've kind of coined the term, DNA Productions, but it'll always be Alan and Dustin from here on forward. And of course, Hodge. We cannot forget our wonderful mascot. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we should have another episode up soon. Once we get things going and we get a schedule, we'll let everybody know. And the goal over time is to get this to where we have a podcast episode weekly. I think that would be the best goal to get to. Um, the starting aspect, it may happen, may not, but once we get our stride, then expect a new episode every week. So I think that's it from me. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.
Have a great one, everyone.